I arrived at the sanatorium just before dusk, when the light over the mountains had begun to flatten into a colorless haze, and the air carried that thin, metallic chill that clings to stone. It had been abandoned for decades, or so the caretaker of the nearby village told me. Yet as I stood at the base of its grand front steps, the building seemed less ruined than expectant, as though the walls themselves had been holding their breath for my arrival. The wooden doors, swollen from years of damp, yielded with a groan, and a draft heavy with the scent of dust and rain-warped plaster slid past me into the open air. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted, the slow pop of contracting beams, or perhaps a footstep on a floor too far away to see. I had come because of the mirror. It wasn't mentioned in any official record, not in the municipal archives or in the few surviving photographs from the sanatorium's operational days. But I had read about it in a stack of letters I'd found in an antiques shop 2 towns over. Correspondence between a former nurse here and her sister. The nurse wrote of a full-length mirror in the central assembly hall, framed in black walnut and silver leaf scrollwork, that was forbidden except during certain ceremonies. Her tone was careful, almost coded, as if she feared the words themselves might be overheard. One line had settled into my mind and refused to leave. We were told never to look for too long, for it would remember us. The main hall lay at the heart of the sanatorium, past corridors where the tiled floors buckled upward like frozen waves, and the air grew heavier with each step. My boots stirred up motes that shimmered briefly in the beam of my flashlight before vanishing into the shadow. The silence here was so thick it seemed to catch on the edges of my breath. I became aware of the faintest scent, not just damp and decay, but something sharper, almost like ozone before a summer storm. When I reached the double doors to the hall, I felt the temperature dip. The hinges protested but swung open enough for me to slip through. Inside, the space was vast and hollow, its high arched windows black with evening, their glass fractured into irregular shards that reflected slivers of my light back at me. And there it was, against the far wall, the mirror. Even from a distance, I could see it was untouched by the decay that gripped the rest of the building. Its surface caught no dust, no tarnish. The frame gleamed as though it had been polished an hour ago. I approached slowly, aware of the soft creak of each floorboard beneath me. My reflection emerged from the darkness, pale face, flashlight clutched too tightly, a nervous tilt to my mouth. Yet as I stood there, I had the unnerving sensation that the reflection was a half-second behind me, the way a badly synchronized video call lags behind the speaker's words. I shifted my weight. The reflection followed, late. The longer I stared, the more the rest of the room seemed to recede, until it was only the mirror and me. The surface between us both barrier and invitation. My ears picked up a faint sound, so low it could have been imagined. A breath drawn somewhere close. Though I was alone, I thought of the nurse's letters, of that warning. It would remember us. What could that mean? How could a thing remember? I told myself I had come only to document it. I raised my camera, but the moment I tried to frame the shot, the air seemed to grow denser, pressing against my chest. The reflection's eyes caught the light differently now, darker, deeper, like wells. I took a step back, and the wood beneath me groaned in a way that felt almost conversational, as though the building itself had shifted to accommodate my retreat. Something inside me resisted leaving. The sensation was subtle at first, like the gentle pull of a current beneath still water, then stronger, a quiet insistence that if I turned away now, I would lose something I couldn't name. My pulse quickened. This was the point where I could still walk out, close the doors, and tell myself the sanatorium was only a ruin and the mirror just furniture left behind. But that choice seemed to grow smaller, farther away, with every second I remained. I inched closer again. This time my reflection's expression was not my own. The set of the mouth was wrong. more certain, less wary. The head tilted slightly, as though considering me with a familiarity I hadn't earned. My skin prickled, and my hands began to tremble, though the air around me was perfectly still. I leaned in, my breath fogging the glass for an instant. Through the faint mist, I thought I saw movement. Not behind me, but within the reflection itself, as though there were a space beyond the surface where shadows shifted just out of view. My own eyes in the glass seemed older now, more tired, with a sadness I didn't recognize but somehow understood. A sound reached me then, the creak of a distant door, followed by the echo of footsteps in the corridor outside. I turned instinctively toward the noise, my flashlight beam sweeping across empty space. When I looked back, the reflection was smiling, not a wide, obvious grin, but a slight upturn of the lips that conveyed both welcome and inevitability. I can't say why I didn't run then. Perhaps it was the quiet certainty that the reflection would be there whether I fled the room or not. In a shop window, a darkened pane, the back of a polished spoon, the thought lodged in my mind like a splinter. What if this wasn't about the mirror showing me itself, but about it learning me, storing the details until it could call them back in some future moment I could neither predict nor avoid? The hall seemed to press inward, the walls inching closer with the slow patience of years. My own breathing sounded foreign, not quite in time with the rise and fall I felt in my chest. I reached out without deciding to, fingertips hovering a hair's breadth from the glass. The surface radiated a coolness that sank instantly into my skin, colder than the air around it, the kind of chill that bypasses the flesh and settles into the bone. And then, so quickly I almost doubted it, my reflection's hand moved first, a fraction before mine, fingertips grazing the inside of the glass as though the surface were only a skin of water. The sensation when I touched it was not the solid resistance I expected, but a faint give, a pliancy that pushed back with the slow, unyielding pressure of something alive. My breath caught. The air in the hall thickened, taking on a faint vibration that made the wood beneath my boots hum in sympathy. I had the sudden conviction that if I pressed just a little harder, the surface would take me in whole, without sound, without struggle. I stepped back sharply, and the contact broke. The mirror stilled, reflecting only the pale, strained version of myself. But something had changed. I could feel it before I could name it. The quiet in the hall was no longer empty. It was aware, charged, as if a conversation had begun, and I had just walked out mid-sentence. I circled the frame, half hoping to find some mechanical trick, a panel or hinge that could explain the momentary softness. The back was sealed, the wood smelling faintly of old smoke and varnish. When I returned to face it again, my reflection stood as I had left it, except for the eyes. They were fixed on mine, unblinking. And then they blinked once, deliberately, though I had not. My pulse quickened to a ragged beat. The memory of the nurse's letter surfaced again, her warning about the mirror remembering. Was this what she meant? That it could hold some version of you apart from yourself, something that could move or speak when you could not? And if so, how long did it keep those versions? The urge to leave surged in me, and with it, an equally strong pull to stay. I could tell myself that it was curiosity, that I wanted answers for the sake of the story I would write later. But deeper down, it felt more like standing at the edge of a cliff in high wind. That perverse impulse to lean forward, to see what would happen if you gave in. A sudden sharp sound cracked through the hall. I spun toward it, flashlight slicing across the emptiness, revealing nothing but dust hanging like pale smoke. When I looked back, there was another figure in the mirror, far behind my own reflection, in the gloom at the far edge of the glass. Too far to make out a face, but the posture was wrong, shoulders angled as if listening. I leaned in, squinting. the figure remained still. The smell of ozone deepened, mingled now with something earthy, like damp soil overturned after years of rest. A flicker passed through the glass. Not light exactly, but a shift, as though the scene inside the mirror had taken on a depth it didn't have before. My reflection seemed farther away now, receding into that other space and the figure behind it closer. The real hall around me felt less substantial, as though the air had thinned. I could hear my own breathing, and faintly beneath it, a second breath. Measured, patient, not in sync with mine. I wanted to tell myself it was an echo, some quirk of acoustics in the cavernous room. But the way the hair rose on the back of my neck told me otherwise. My hand found the edge of the frame again. The wood was cold, almost painfully so, and I realized with a jolt that my fingertips left no condensation on the glass now, no matter how close I leaned. I thought of my life outside this place, the people who barely noticed if I was there, the days that blurred into each other without leaving a mark. What if the mirror's memory was sharper than mine? What if it could hold me in a way the world never had? The figure in the background took a step forward. It was enough for the darkness to peel back slightly, revealing a face that was not mine but carried something of it. The angle of the jaw, the line of the brow, altered by time I hadn't lived. It looked at me with the familiarity of someone who knew how the story ended. My story. I couldn't move. The eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment I felt the floor tilt. Or maybe it was me leaning forward without realizing it. The reflection reached out again, hand to hand. And this time when my fingertips touched the surface, it was warm, alive. A voice, low and without echo, spoke inside my head rather than in my ears. Not words exactly, but the shape of a thought. You've already been here before. Memories I didn't recognize flashed behind my eyes. Standing in this same hall in another season, the windows unbroken, the air smelling faintly of antiseptic, my reflection wearing clothes I'd never owned, speaking to people whose faces I could almost name. The images were crisp, as though pulled from someone else's life but lit by the same sun I had always known. The warmth under my fingers deepened until it felt like a pulse. My own heartbeat began to sync with it, slower, steadier, until I could no longer tell which rhythm was mine. The hall beyond the glass seemed brighter now, the colors richer, and I realized with a slow, dawning certainty that if I stepped forward, my foot would find the floor there as easily as here. And then, as if sensing my hesitation, the figure, the older, altered version of me, gave a small nod. Not beckoning, not urging, just acknowledging that this was the point I would either cross or turn away from forever. I thought of all the years I had spent feeling like a ghost in my own life, unseen, unremembered. The choice was not really a choice at all. I stepped forward. The moment my weight shifted into the glass, there was no sensation of breaking through. The air was simply different, heavier, warmer, humming faintly as though charged. I stood in the hall, but it was whole again, the windows unshattered, the wood polished to a soft sheen, and I could feel the memory of me settling into place, as though I had always been here. I turned back once. Through the mirror, I saw the ruined hall I'd left behind, empty but for a pale figure standing where I had been. My own face looked out at me from that side now, hesitant, uncertain, a visitor on the threshold. The glass shimmered, and the image faded until there was nothing but my reflection again, but it was not the same. My eyes in the glass were calm, certain, and I understood, with the clarity of someone remembering rather than realizing, that the mirror had not taken me. It had given me back to myself.